leadership program workshops. So we're excited to be offering this to our community leadership program fellows, as well as some other community partners who have joined us this evening, when we're really glad to see them. And I'm really excited to introduce Chase Carson. He is the founder and CEO of Unity Allies. He was born and raised in Laurel County, Kentucky, and he graduated from South Laurel High School and also just graduated from EKU, earning his BBA in accounting. So congratulations, Chase. He's also has taken extensive training and certifications from the University of Central Florida, the King Center, and Google's I Am Remarkable training program. And Chase is ready to help educate and lead his community forward in welcoming all groups of diversity to this area of Southeastern Kentucky and areas across the nation. So we're glad to have Chase. He's going to be presenting, and then also on a panel with some other board members of Unity Allies. So we're excited to have him. I'm gonna go ahead and I think just turn it over to Chase, and then I think we'll do an icebreaker.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jacqueline. So she said it perfectly. My name's Chase Carson. I'm the CEO and director of Unity Allies, which is a nonprofit organization founded right here in London, Laurel County. And today I'm joined by Carl Weaver, Angie Weaver, and Keith Green, who are also a part of Unity Allies and help us do our great work. So our presentation today is what is diversity? And this presentation was also put together by some folks at Missouri State. So thank you to them for helping us put this together. But before we get started, before I tell you a little bit more about us and what we do, I want to hear from everyone in this group that we have this afternoon. So we're going to do a real simple icebreaker, nothing too intimidating, so don't feel pressured, but all it is just what's your name and 2 forms of diversity that you have. So for example, I'll go first. My name's Chase Carson, and 2 forms of diversity that I have is I am a biracial male, and also I was raised by a single mother. So those are my 2 forms of diversity. And then we'll do sort of a popcorn effect. So once you go, just call on somebody else, and then once they go, they call on somebody different. So I'll call on Donna if you'd like to share.
Sorry, I have to unmute myself first, don't I? So I'm Donna Daniels, and I'm the director of the Brushy Fork Leadership Institute at Berea College. I'm really glad to be here. And you wanted us to share about our diversity?
Yes, ma'am. Just 2 forms.
2 forms of diversity for me is, I guess, that I'm a woman in leadership. I think that is a form of diversity. And also, I did come from a low-income family, and was fortunate enough to come to Berea College, and that really gave me a step up in the world. So I think that's another form of diversity for me.
Absolutely.
All right. And I think that I will call on Daniel.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So I'm Daniel Fairby Jr., and my 2 forms of identity are that I am non-binary, pronouns they, them, and I am Appalachian, from a low-income family. I'm going to go ahead and popcorn to Mindy.
And Mindy just let us know that her internet is unstable and she'll try to talk when she can. So Mindy, are you able to talk now? I don't know if we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, we're in a good zone then. I am retirement age, and I think being a leader of a nonprofit perhaps would be part of my diversity. I will say our organization reaches out with programs for diverse populations. And I will pass it over to Angie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Angelica Weaver, and my 2 points of diversity is that I am a female in the law enforcement community. I've been a 25-year veteran of that. And also that my entire family on my mother's side is affected by climate change. She is from a small island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Kiribati. which will be non-existent in a couple of years. And I'll pass it to Carl.
Sorry about that. I'm having to use my phone. I'm pressing on my keyboard. So my name's Carl Weaver. I'm organizer with Kentuckians for the Commonwealth. My two examples of diversity, I guess, would be first and foremost, I think mine and Angie's family, when we get together, it's very, very diverse, especially in a community that we live in, which has very little to any diversity. And the other diversity would be that I'm very comfortable and gravitate towards supporting women's empowerment. I was raised by strong women. I was raised by a whole family. I wasn't raised in a divorce situation. I was raised by both parents, but it was normal to see strong women in my family in leadership positions and strong men supporting them. And I will pass to Jacqueline if you went.
If not, I'll go. I'm Jacqueline Coram. I'm the program coordinator at Brushy Fork, and two kind of diversity pieces of my identity is that I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, and also that I'm not from Kentucky. So I've kind of moved around a lot. So I kind of feel like that kind of also adds, yeah, that's kind of a different perspective. And I will call on Dee.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dee Parker. I'm a recruitment specialist at Hazard Community Technical College. My pronouns are he, him. Two forms of diversity. I'm a Black male, and I was raised by my grandmother, so I was raised in a single parent home, and that's just a little bit about me. And I will pass it to whoever hasn't went next.
I think Keith maybe is the only person who hasn't gone.
All right, I'll pass it to Keith.
Hello, I'm Keith Green. One of my, say, diverse things in my life are I grew up in Washington, D.C., and then lived 17 years in San Francisco. And now I've lived the last 8 years here in Eastern Kentucky. So I've had a very diverse living experiences. And I'm also, I have in a biracial marriage. So, we share that and our diversity.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing that. And I wanted to touch on and say, keep in mind as we go through this presentation and as we learn a little bit about diversity, about if there's any other forms of diversity that you didn't think would be considered a form of your diversity, but actually is. But after listening to all of yours, just two forms of your diversity, it sounds like you have a pretty well understanding of it. Because there's a lot of people that just think diversity is just either your race or gender, and that's it, when it's really not. It's such a broad topic, and it can be anything, like in Keith's example, being in a biracial marriage, or Donna's example of being a woman in leadership. I mean, there are so many different forms of diversity out there. And even if you don't think it is, it very well possibly could be. And so just a little bit about our organization. You may be wondering, I thought you was with Unity Allies. What's this Laurel County Diversity and Inclusion Council? Well, the Laurel County Diversity and Inclusion Council is a chapter of Unity Allies, which is a nonprofit organization with the purpose of recognizing, identifying, and acting in communities lacking education on diversity and/or inclusiveness in the community. The council is composed of diverse individuals from the community that serve towards making the community a more diverse and inclusive environment. So just a simple breakdown of that is Unity Allies is the mother organization. It's the organization that goes to different communities and help people in those respective communities with whatever problem they may be facing, or, like I said, educating that specific community on diversity and inclusion. And the Laurel County Diversity and Inclusion Council is tied specifically to the Laurel County, London area. So like Keith, Angie, and Carl, they are all involved in the Laurel County Diversity Council and help us here in Laurel, London, Kentucky. So our mission is to educate, promote, and help implement diversity inclusion in everyday lives. The goal is to create a beloved community, which I don't know if some of you are familiar with that or not, but that's basically what Martin Luther King Jr., that's what his teachings were when he was still alive and with us, was he wanted to create a beloved community where everyone can respect each other's differences, educate the uneducated, help the less fortunate, and bring the community together as a whole. So with the Diversity Council, the 5 steps of our council include social justice, employment and education, which is educating on social justice and racial equality. This also applies to employment as well. We also have criminal justice, educating law enforcement. We have youth programming, which is educating and working with the youth to educate and prepare them to work in diverse groups. And then dialogue, which is educating how to speak and what dialogue is accepted and not accepted. And then finally, the most important is education, working with schools to help implement learning on diversity and inclusion, because at Unity Allies, we believe education is key. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing and let Jacqueline share this video for us real quick and learn about what diversity and equality is all about.
Sorry, y'all, just a sec.
You're fine.
Thank you. Will y'all let me know if you have a hard time hearing this? I just want to give me a thumbs up if it's coming through well.
We're not getting any sound.
Yeah, you may have to click, I don't know if you did already, but when you go to share the screen, click the share audio.
Audio, computer audio or something.
All right, I've clicked that. Okay. Okay, now I need to click it again. Got it. Thank you guys for letting me know. I'm gonna rewind it.
Equality, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace.
Oops. I'm so sorry, I lost. Okay. Was it playing when you guys?
Mhm.
Okay, I'm
You
gonna
get
do it
those
again.
odd little boxes too, you know, when I
Okay, I'll figure out how to move those too.
if you want to drop the link in the chat, maybe I could share. I can try that. Give this a shot here. Okay. All right.
Thanks, Donna.
Oh, no worries. So now we'll see if I can do this.
Hey, like I was just saying with technology, it seems like something always goes
Yeah, there will always be a little thing that can happen. But okay, and we are sharing sound and optimizing for video clip. Let me share.
Equality, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace.
That's good, Donna.
Good. Okay.
We just have to expand it. Oh,
When we think about
And there
the
is a
topic of
box.
equality, diversity, and inclusion, we sometimes
Great.
think of the Equality Act 2010, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. The 9 protected characteristics are very important in identifying what is protected by law. But what about our behaviours at work? So let's take a closer look at this topic. Equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. In the UK, the Equality Act 2010 safeguards those with protected characteristics from discrimination in the workplace. Equity, on the other hand, recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. An equity approach emphasizes that everyone should not be treated the same, but according to their own needs. Diversity is to respect and enjoy a wide range of cultural and individual differences, thereby including everyone. Diversity goes beyond recognizing that we are different in measurable ways. Diversity is inclusion. And inclusion at work reflects an environment where all individuals are treated fairly and with respect, regardless of their background, identity, or circumstance, having equal access to opportunities and resources which allow them to contribute to the organization's success. The idea behind the iceberg model is that culture is pictured as an iceberg. Only a very small proportion of the iceberg is visible above the waterline. The tip of the iceberg is in fact supported by a much larger, although invisible part underneath the water. This part of the iceberg is its foundation. Above the waterline, examples of visible parts include food, style of dress, music, and language. But the powerful dimensions of culture are the more difficult to spot. The social norms, the values, the basic assumptions about space and time, and the concept of justice and of self. The iceberg model of culture implies that the visible parts of culture are just expressions of the invisible parts. It highlights the difficulty of understanding people from different cultural backgrounds, because although we see what's above the waterline, we cannot immediately realize what the foundations are. Unconscious bias is implicit preference. It refers to a bias which we're unaware of and which happens outside of our control. It is a bias that happens automatically and is triggered by our brain making a quick judgment and assessment of people and situations. It is influenced by our socialization, background, cultural environment, and personal experiences. It may be responsible for negative assumptions and unwitting discrimination against people who may be considered different and do not share the same values, background, and culture as ours. When we embrace organizational equality, diversity, and inclusion, there are huge benefits for all of us. Increased productivity, a rise in creativity, more innovation, fast problem solving, and better decision making. So we all have a duty to foster and embrace equality, diversity, and inclusion. Let's get started.
Thank you for sharing that, Donna. That's one of my favorite videos out there on YouTube pertaining to diversity and inclusion, because it's about a little over 4 minutes long, and it unpacks a ton of information about the differences between equality and equity, and then also the benefits of promoting diversity in your not only just everyday life but in your workplace as well. Because I get a lot of the time people, for example, I was just out and about one day and someone had stopped me and said that they saw our page on social media and was like, you have a typo in your bio. It says equity instead of equality. And we was like, no, it should say equity, because a lot of people confuse the two a lot. But the easiest way, like the video showed a nice example of the people with different forms of diversity having different bikes pertaining to whether they have a physical or mental disability, or whether it was a full-grown man or a little kid. A little kid's not going to have a big grown-up mountain bike. They're going to have a little tricycle. So equity is about attributing to the specific people's needs, as opposed to where equality is treating everyone the same. But don't get the misconception that you can only have one or the other. You can still practice both. So it's important to understand just the differences between equality and equity. because though they are similar, they are still pretty different. And so let me go back to sharing my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. All right, so what is diversity? So like I said, that video had a lot of information and you may have missed it, but diversity means more than just acknowledging and or tolerating difference. Diversity is a set of conscious practices that involve understanding and appreciating interdependence of humanity, cultures, and the natural environment. Practicing mutual respect for qualities and experiences that are different from our own. Understanding that diversity includes not only ways of being, but also ways of knowing. Recognizing that personal, cultural, and institutionalized discrimination creates and sustains privileges for some while creating and sustaining disadvantages for others. Building alliances across differences so that we can work together to eradicate all forms of discrimination. So therefore, diversity includes knowing how to relate to those qualities and conditions that are different from our own and outside the groups to which we belong, yet are present in other individuals and groups. These include, but are not limited to, age, ethnicity, class, gender, physical, whether ability or qualities, race, sexual orientation, religion, the list goes on and on. Like I said in the beginning of the presentation, a lot of people believe that diversity is, either race or gender. Some people, I think it was Donna even mentioned, coming from a low income family, a lot of people wouldn't suspect that that's a form of diversity, but it is. It's more than just your complexion of your skin or whether you identify as male or female. There's a lot going into it. Like this perfect example, if you can see the picture, I don't know if it's big enough on your screen or not, but it's like basically a cake. You have your cake and that's the final product, but there's a lot more that goes into a cake that help make it what it is. And the same can be said about each of us individually. Though we may be human beings and we have 2 arms, 2 legs, there's even people out there that may have, an extra arm or a leg, or the stuff underneath their outside appearance that you can't see within that makes up their diversity, which we'll touch on that a little bit later. And so here's a little quote. People often relate diversity to race and sometimes gender and more recently sexual orientation. I think this is a pretty narrow view of what diversity means. It can also be ways of thinking and your intellectual background and training, which is also true. It doesn't just have to be, like I keep saying, your gender and age. It can be your intellectual as well. So what is inclusion? I'll start off by giving a funny little story. When our organization first started going around to public events in Laurel County, we had the basic setup. We would have a table in the tent, saying who we are, what we do. And we had a lot of little goodies on our table that were free if you could answer a question, which is, we had 2 questions. One was, what is diversity and inclusion? And what does diversity and inclusion mean to you? And believe it or not, when asking people what inclusion meant, a lot of people said they had inclusion mixed up with exclusion. They were thinking that it means, you don't include people. And we were like, no, that's quite the opposite. And we had a lot of people tell us that too. And we had to sit down with them and educate them on what inclusion means and the importance of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so what is inclusion? It involves bringing together and harnessing diverse forces and resources in a way that is beneficial. Inclusion puts the concept and practice of diversity into action by creating an environment of involvement, respect, and connection, where the richness of ideas, backgrounds, and perspectives are harnessed to create business value and overall success. So like on the previous slide, we had all the ingredients that made up a cake. And then on this slide, we have the final product, the cake, which is making the mix work. So you bring all of these stuff in, which you include that makes up your diversity, and then looking on the side of people that look different than you or speak different than you or may have different religious beliefs or just beliefs in general, it's still important to include those people, even though you have different forms of diversity. If you want to practice the inclusiveness and including those people and being accepting of their ideas is a form of practicing inclusion. So what is the difference between diversity and inclusion? You know, every time you hear DE&I, it's always together. It's always diversity and inclusion. So are they the same? Are they different? Well, here are some points. Diversity is simply a representation of many different types of people, gender, race, ability, religion, etc. Diversity often focuses on the differences and is referred to as the mix. So like we were talking about on, I guess it's 3 slides prior, all the ingredients that make up a cake, that is what diversity is. And inclusion is the deliberate act of welcoming diversity and creating an environment where all different kinds of people can thrive and succeed. Inclusion is the act of making the mix work. So you have all of these ingredients, whether it's your own diversity or you're in a workplace and you have people from all kinds of different backgrounds and forms of diversity. Inclusion is the process of bringing all of those different ingredients together and building an inclusive environment, whether in your work or as a person, being inclusive of all your forms of diversity. So again, diversity is what you have and inclusion is what you do. Simply having a diverse group, team, workforce, classroom, etc. is not enough. Everyone should feel safe and encouraged to fully participate and share and be on equal footing as everyone else. And I don't know if you caught the list of benefits towards the end of the video that we watched. It gave a list of all the different benefits of having a diverse and inclusive workplace, and it leads to increased productivity, your work environment's healthier and happier, and there's all kinds of other different benefits that come from having a diverse and inclusive work environment. So we're going to have just a little, there's a few of us, so we can just talk about this amongst ourselves just for a few minutes. So how can you embrace your own diversity and how can you celebrate others' diversity? So I'll call on somebody to go first, and I'll give you a few minutes to think about this question first, and then we can start sharing our answers. So again, how can you embrace your own diversity and how can you celebrate others' diversity? And I'll give you about a minute or so to think about this. All right. I think the first person I'll call on, the lucky first person, will be D, if you want to go ahead and share.
All right. I've been embracing my diversity all my life. It's something I was born with. And the ways that I can celebrate others' diversity is what I've been doing, including everybody, treating everybody equal, trying to make an equal playing field for all of us. That's how we celebrate each other. And I guess, is it my turn to pass it on to somebody else, Chase?
Yes, please, if you don't care.
All right, I'll pass it off to Jacqueline.
Thanks. So I was thinking about this, and I think that one way is maybe just having some really good like one-on-one conversations with people, really kind of trying to get to know people on a deeper level. I saw this like icebreaker activity related to diversity and inclusion, and it was to like I just asked people who like how did you get your name, because a lot of people have stories about maybe they were named after a family member, or maybe their name means something to them, and how that could be maybe an icebreaker. And I think that maybe is one little example. And I will pass it off to Carl.
Okay. Thank you. Celebrate or embrace my own diversity. Excuse me. I think that at least I was not aware of, or I think the diversity I've experienced personally has evolved as I've aged and gotten older, and the community and my world around me has expanded. I feel that being a white male, having the opportunity to not deny that that's been in this society an opportunity for privilege, just for existing, but to try to share that and not apologize for that, but to share that and empower others and share space. If that makes sense, hopefully it sounded as good out loud as it did in my head. But others' diversity, I just think if people are content, I have a lot of people in my family, my Aunt Gladys and a few other people truly celebrate other people's successes. And I always tried to model that. And I paid attention to that, how genuinely happy she'd be for their good fortune. And when you're secure, you have space to love and accept and celebrate others. And when you're in crisis, so I guess being able to celebrate others of diversity, put yourself in a good place. So I will pass it on to, let me look over here. I'm flipping through my phone. Keith.
All right. Get my stuff together. So ways I kind of embrace my own diversity is to not be ashamed of any of my experiences, to no matter what company I may be in, or regardless of how people may I might when you kind of walk into a room, you can tell the kind of the climate, or you start making assumptions. I don't allow fear to force me to express myself in a way that's that's different than what's ever going on with me, or what experiences I've already had, or ideologies I cherish and things like that. So that's kind of the way I embrace my own diversity. I'm just proud of who I am and what I've become and what I've experienced, and I'm not afraid to share that with other people, regardless of who it may be, and whatever their diversity may be. And then ways that I celebrate with others is, or ways I can celebrate others' diversity is by recognizing it a lot of times, especially being a person who is not, for instance, from a person being from Eastern Kentucky, and I haven't experienced a lot of the things like when I've gone to a couple of bluegrass festivals, or I've done some camping, which is, a lot different than the metropolitan areas I've lived in before. I didn't allow, once again, fear to keep me from enjoying those things and trying squirrel pie, or dumplings, or whatever things that someone may share with me that is different to me, including even like political ideology and things like that. I don't immediately dismiss someone because it doesn't necessarily align with me, or I don't feel like it's factually accurate. I take moments to hear people out and look for commonalities, or look for opportunities to challenge my own beliefs. So that's how I kind of celebrate other people's diversity. Pass it on to, it's zoomed. Okay. Donna, have you gone yet? Okay, Donna.
I have not. And so when I think about this idea of embracing my own diversity, I tend to think about these kinds of things in stories. And for a little while, I lived out west and worked in Las Vegas. And I remember saying to my husband, I'm not sure they're going to think I'm dumb because of my accent, because I had that narrative the whole time that I grew up in Appalachia that, oh, when you leave Appalachia, if you keep your accent, people think you're dumb. And so I remember saying that to him, but it was very interesting because I found that there was a very diverse population there. Of course, it's a big city, 2.5 million people in that area. And people were genuinely curious about where I came from. And they would say, you've got the neatest accent. Where are you from? And so I started opening myself up to sharing that with them and sharing where I came from and talking about living on a farm in Estill County in the middle of nowhere and the kind of interesting things that happened to me there. And people were just really fascinated by it. But I ended up being, I think, kind of an ambassador for Appalachia in a way, because, after they heard my accent and heard about where I'm from, their next question is whether I had read Hillbilly Elegy. So I had to educate them a little bit about that. But, and so when I think about celebrating others' diversity, and I did this there as well, that you just open space for the sharing of stories. And that's what we did a lot of with the office workers. I ended up working for the county government, and, we had many different folks, different races, different ethnicities, a lot of different backgrounds there. And so I think for me, using story to celebrate each other's diversity is how we did that. So. And so I will call on Mindy and Dan. I don't know if Dan's there too, but.
Hi, Donna. Yes, he's in the background back
Okay.
there chiming in. And we've been talking together during this presentation. And, we are older than middle-aged white people. We are Medicare aged. So we are in that retired population. And grew up in Ashland, Kentucky, which had a small population of people of color. There was really not much talk about anybody of a different sexual preference. So I guess even, it was a small town, probably 32,000. So we were kind of isolated from all that. But coming out here to Grayson, Kentucky, which is even smaller, 3,000 people perhaps, we started a small nonprofit art gallery. Retired folk, we had the time to devote to that and the passion to do it. So we have created and celebrated others' diversities by having art and music shows that appeal to different groups. We've had, from blues to metal to hip hop music. Our art shows a lot of times are themed. We had our second Pride event this June. Our first Pride event last year was in collaboration with Ashland Pride, which is an established group. And they helped us set up the entertainment. So we ended up with 16 drag acts that we really had planned having, although it was great. We loved it. It was so entertaining. But then that led to a big city council meeting because the city council provides us some funding. It didn't back us down, and our supporters showed up to speak up for the inclusion that the gallery provides and the safe space for everybody of every type to come in there. So I think we celebrate others' diversity because we are welcoming and open to all. And that's our passion. So thank you.
And then I believe Daniel and Angie haven't went yet. So either one of you all, if you'd like to share.
You want to arm wrestle for it, Daniel?
Sorry, I may have frozen up. So yes, I will pass it to either Angie or Daniel.
I was going to say, Angie, it's been a very long day, so I will concede the floor.
Okay, so how I embrace my own diversity. When I was growing up in the 70s here in Whitley County, there wasn't very many children that look like me. And so my mother, in an effort to combat the racism that I would experience, she really had me focus on my Appalachian side and to embrace the Appalachianness of myself. And so I have recently really started to undo that work of really embracing my Micronesian self. And one of those ways is to try really hard to use my full name of Angelica instead of Angie. Of course, if you're calling me Angie now, please continue to do so. But when I'm introduced now, it just for my own peace of mind to be called Angelica. And then how I celebrate others' diversity is I have worked really hard in different spaces to obtain leadership roles. And so one of the ways that I celebrate diversity is to share the stage with other people, and especially underserved communities that haven't had the opportunity like I have, and to make sure that they come and have a voice, and that people listen to them, and whatever influence that I have, that I share that with the group, with whoever. So Daniel, your turn.
Thank you. And I guess that I could say I embrace my own diversity by kind of refusing to make it small. I know that some aspects of like my identity and who I am as a person, not everyone understands or has, the kind of vocabulary or experience with people who are like me, but the fact that I am very much aware that I look like a regular cisgender male. But I think that I embrace it by not allowing people to take shortcuts with my identity that infringe upon the space that I allow myself to take up. A way to celebrate others' diversity is, I think it's being a safe place from fear and insecurity for people who have had to either put their identities in kind of a backseat or a back burner in order to make other people more comfortable. Being an advocate and a listener, and when people share their stories, to listen to them and celebrate them. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you all for those answers, and they were beautiful. And I want to thank you all for being open and sharing these answers with me and with the others on this call, because a lot of people, for some reason, when you talk about diversity, a lot of people are intimidated or scared or don't want to share because I can't tell you why. It's something that you should embrace and should be proud of, like all of you had mentioned in your answers, because it's what makes you who you are. Your diversity is you. That's what makes you who. That's what makes Jacqueline Jacqueline. That's what makes Donna Donna. It's what makes Daniel Daniel. That's what diversity is all about. Is just who you are, what makes up who you are. And so thank you all for sharing those answers. And I want you to look at this list here. Everyone's narrative. Where are you coming from? Befriend all people, empathy, actively accept, show compassion. Every single one of y'all listed at all 6 of these different forms of how to embrace diversity. And I don't think anybody has seen this presentation before. And so a little round of applause to you all for hitting all 6 of these points. Because this is exactly how you embrace diversity, is by asking questions, having an open mind, having that empathy and wanting to see from the other side of the fence, instead of having that closed mind of I don't understand the he, she, they, them, so I'm not going to get involved in it, and I'm not going to talk to people about it or ask questions. But on the other side of that, having that open mind, why do we need these pronouns? Why do you go by those pronouns? Asking these questions and developing that understanding is a way of practicing diversity and inclusion, trying to understand and get an understanding of why we use certain terms and why people go by certain terms. So again, I want to thank you all for your participation. And so I'll quit sharing my screen again and let either Donna or Jacqueline share our next video. Thank you for sharing that. We're coming up on the hour, so I'm going to try to get through the rest of the slides so we have plenty of time for our panel discussion. But just as I'm going through these slides, if you could just in the chat box, just write something small, sentence, whatever, about the message behind that video that we just watched. What was the message that that video was trying to portray? And if you would like to share what you think in the chat box, that would be great. And so this is an activity called First Impressions. Just real quick, just stare at the screen. You see the black boxes, and what do you see? I want to call on Angie. You staring at the black boxes, Angie. What do you see?
I am staring at the black boxes, but I see dots. Is that what I'm supposed to see?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So that first impression. So you just looking at the slide here, we can see obviously all these black boxes. You know what's on the outside, But as you begin to look closer, like Angie said, you start seeing little gray balls popping up everywhere. And so the same can be said about diversity. And I mentioned that a little earlier in the presentation that diversity is more than just what we see on the outside. You know, sometimes you have to look a little bit deeper in to really understand someone and who they are. Like the video we just watched. You know, it's more than just what we see on the outside that makes up a person. It's about what we are on the inside too as well. And then we'll skip this video. We may watch this video coming back to it, but I want to ask these questions here is, why do you think first impressions are important? How do first impressions change the way we see people? Have you ever had a wrong first impression of someone? And has someone ever had a wrong impression of you? And we won't share these answers, but that's just something to think about. You know, how do first impressions change the way we see people? You know, I know for me personally, growing up in school, or whether it's my mother, you know, they always stress first impressions are the, you know, key. You know, you don't want to show up to a job interview in PJs and a hoodie, your hair not fixed, because, you know, what message is that sending your first time meeting your potentially new boss? As opposed to if you show up to that job interview, you know, you got a nice haircut, you're well dressed, smell good, don't smell like you haven't took a shower in about a week. So first impressions are very important. And have you ever had a wrong first impression of someone? Have you ever prejudged someone, just whether you see them on social media or just out and about, and you're like, geez, that person does not seem like someone I would like to be around. And then later down the road, that person ends up being a real good friend or someone completely great that you had a complete wrong impression of them. And then has someone ever had a wrong impression of you? Has someone ever told you they have? You know, so I know plenty of times I've been told, more when I was in high school, I'll be walking around, and, you know, I played basketball when I was in high school. So I would hear all the time people that had never talked to me finally getting the opportunity to talk to me, and they'd be like, geez, man, you know, Chase, I thought you were, you know, your typical jock. You were going to be a jerk. We're going to feel like you're better than everybody else. And that's not the case at all. If you know me, hopefully you don't think that way of me. Hopefully you think I'm a very outgoing, friendly individual. But just impressions are very important, and it's important that we don't prejudge someone just by the way they look or act, that we actually get to know that person before we make any kind of judgment about them. And then here's another activity. Surely you all are familiar with this one. I know I did this a bunch in high school and middle school as well. But it's called Connect the Dots. And so if you don't already know this activity, I'm not going to spoil it for you because I'm sure you'll see this later on down the road. And I don't want to give you a little cheat sheet on how to complete this activity. But I encourage you to, anytime you can find this online, just type in Connect the Dots activity and you can easily find it. And the goal is to connect all of the dots without lifting your pencil off the paper. And so, you know, it sounds easy, but as you get going, it can be pretty difficult if you don't know the correct way to do it. And so were you able to connect the dots? And
I wasn't. Are you going to tell us how to connect the dots?
No, I want you.
Okay, we'll try.
How much time do we have? 4 minutes. Jacqueline, how long is can you look and see how long this video is here?
Yes,
and if it's not too long, we'll do that activity because I want
that video is 4 minutes.
Yeah, 4 minutes and 24 seconds is what.
So it's up to you all. We can watch this video and do the activity or just watch the video. What do y'all want to do?
Maybe we'll send the answer after we send out the recording so that people can try it on their own. I've tried it and I can't figure it out. So I'll just be waiting on the edge of my seat. So we'll send out the answer that way.
Sounds good. So Jacqueline, if you don't care to share this video, because I do want people to see this one.
Yeah, I've got it. I'll go ahead and take care of
Donna,
it.
you
That's
can-
okay.
Thanks so much, Donna.
Yep. No worries.
Yeah, I can't be giving out a little cheat, Jacqueline.
Oops, I think I'm muted.
Creating sides.
Great, we can hear it now, Donna.
There's us, and there's them. Those we feel comfortable around, and those we don't. There are those of us with many chapters, and those just starting their own stories. There's the well-to-do, and those doing what they can. There are those we share something with, and those we don't seem to share anything with.
Welcome, and thank you for coming today, guys. Today I'm going to be conducting an experiment where I'll ask you a series of questions. Now, these questions will be very personal questions, and for us to get a true result, I need you to be completely honest with how you respond. The first question I have is, who in here was the class clown? Who is never on time?
And then there's us. We who have tattoos. We who feel lonely. We who have been bullied. We who have bullied others. We who are madly in love. We who have overcome great adversity. And there's the lucky ones, whose team won the championship this year. We who beat cancer. And then there's all of us who are created in the image of God. And as one body, we stand together, united as one under His grace.
video almost makes you want to shed a tear.
It does.
But that it shares a great message. Like I keep saying, no one looks alike. We unless you're an identical twin or something, we all are different on the outside. But when you look past our appearance, a lot of us may have similarities, whether you are a cancer survivor, whether you've been bullied, whether you come from a low income family, whether you've faced adversity, whatever it is, there's a lot that can bring us together if we just take that time to really sit down and understand who we're talking with. I that goes back to impressions. A lot of people may feel intimidated or scared to talk with or interact with someone that doesn't look like them because they have no prior experience. But at the end of the day, it's simple. We're all humans. We all live on this planet here together. And so we need to love and accept everyone for who they are instead of exclude them. We all need to practice diversity and inclusion because, like I keep saying, we live on this planet here together. We're human beings and we need to love each other like we're your own brother, sister, whatever. And so just to sum it all up, the diversity and inclusion field is extremely broad and continuing to grow. You can't know everything, but you can always keep learning. Diversity is more than just race and ethnicity. It is what makes you, you. Ask yourself, would you like if someone treated you the way you treat them? And then lastly, most importantly, keep an open mind. You never know, some of the best people you ever meet may look nothing like you. And so thank you. You can find our organization on Facebook and Instagram at Unity Allies. And so I went 4 minutes over, so I tried to get us right there at an hour. But now I'll quit sharing my screen and transition into the panel discussion, and we can start with any questions that you all may have, or we have some questions that we had answered prior that we can start off with if no one has any questions right now. Just however you all want to do it.
Does anybody have, do you want to introduce our panel members maybe, Chase? And
Yeah.
I know that, we've got a small audience, but we can, that way folks that watch our recording will be able to know who these folks are too. I know they've introduced themselves already, but.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'll just let everyone introduce themselves. I'll go first. My name's Chase Carson. I'm director of Unity Allies. Born and raised here in Laurel, London, Kentucky. Just graduated with my undergrad from Eastern Kentucky University, and accepted a new job working as an accountant for Delta Gas. So staying super busy. And then I'll pass it on to Carl.
Carl Weaver. Angie and I live in Williamsburg together and just have a great little situation going on down here. We're just good life, and she's a victims advocate and I'm an organizer. So grew up in London. I actually went to school with Chase's dad, so I've always felt pretty close with Chase. I'll pass it along to Jacqueline.
I will just be helping with moderating, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll pass it back. Keith, you haven't introduced yourself as a panelist yet, right?
Keith had to step away. I don't know if
Okay.
he's back yet or not, but I'll go ahead and introduce Keith. Keith Green lives in Corbin, Kentucky. Is not originally from Kentucky. Believe he's from the Bay Area, San Francisco. So the West Coast, a lot different than over here in Appalachia. But he's also lived in other places too as well. Keith is an excellent drummer. If you haven't got the chance to catch Keith out You can find him on Facebook, and he updates his page on where him and his band play, but he's an excellent musician, even better guy. He works for a nonprofit down in Barberville, I believe it is, and they do great work down there as well. He's an excellent guy to have with us, and we're super excited to have him here on this panel with us. And so, Angelica, if you would like to go next.
Thank you, Chase. I'm Angelica Weaver, and I'm employed by the Williamsburg Police Department as a victims advocate for domestic violence and sexual assault victims in the area, but I'm also a community organizer, most recently with Y Whitley. And I'm also this year a facilitator for the Bridge the Gap program, which is a program that teaches individuals how to dialogue on tough subjects that currently divide us, such as race, religion, immigration, and criminal justice reform.
And I believe that's all of us. And so let me see, I think I was looking in the chat and we had a question. So Mindy, if you'd like to go ahead and share your question.
Thank you, Chase. Okay, so our little town is 86% white. We have maybe 4% people of color, biracial, but they typically are at our university during the college season. And then we have a Hispanic population. Now, we have tried to reach out, but we don't know what's an appropriate way to reach out. I don't want to go in the Mexican restaurant and say, hey, you people from Mexico, or you people who speak Spanish, we want you to come to our events. How do we reach out in an appropriate manner that doesn't seem like I'm invading your space and I'm this old white woman who's telling you what you need to do?
Mm-hmm. Would anyone like to answer that, start us off?
Well, I've answered that to myself. Being an organizer with KFTC, I took to heart so much the recruitment of bringing people together, and just the whole. It felt so clumsy, and I finally realized, like, dude, just talk to people, just connect with people. They will, the opportunity to join KFTC, Kentucky's for the Commonwealth, whatever, will present itself later. You don't have to throw that in there in the first 10 minutes. To answer that question, that was just posed, how would I talk to somebody, or how do I talk to somebody of diversity or diverse or different from me, or different ethnicity or different background? How would I talk? I don't, I wouldn't ask myself that growing up. I wouldn't ask myself that of somebody that I felt similar to or looked like me. So I don't need to ask that of somebody, that is different than me. There's commonality because there's two human beings in the same space. But why am I focusing so much on, I don't introduce Chase as my black friend. He's my friend. He's the son of a good friend. I didn't refer to Gary as my black friend. So I don't refer to my white friends as my white friends. They're just my friends. So I think I hope I'm answering that the way I'm trying to. Is best way to do is don't differentiate. Connect on a human level, as hippie as that may sound.
I will add to that, Mindy. But working in law enforcement and having to reach underserved populations such as the Hispanic community, consistency is key. So making sure that you are showing up at different places besides the Mexican restaurant where the Hispanic population congregates, and building up trust. I can tell, for an example, for Y Whitley, is that every year our town has summer block parties, and from those block parties, it's the same bands every year. And the population of people that come down to the block parties, they love these bands. And but it attracts the same type of population. So what we wanted to do when we created another festival, another music festival, was to make sure that we were reaching other diverse audiences. So when you are putting something together, perhaps put it together with the population that you have in mind. Ask someone, or educate yourself on what art looks like for the Hispanic population, what kind of things that they celebrate, and really build for that community.
Yeah, I'd have to build on that just real briefly. Chase and I collaborated to help Lake Cumberland Diversity Council, I think, pull off a pretty good Juneteenth event. And they had really had a very controversial or did not meet expectations the year before. And just briefly, the organizer was talking to me, and Chase as a guidepost. He said, look, reach out to the community you're targeting, reach out to the Black community, listen to the Black community. If that's what they want, go small. If they want more education, lean on what they want, know who you're trying to serve. The others will come or they won't come, but it'll be better that way. And, I feel like I saw Chase's guidance there. And, it's just like Angie was saying, that those groups keep, they keep doing the same thing over and over. And I made the gesture like this, like the crowd keeps getting smaller and smaller, so it's not like we're trying to eliminate other opportunities, but add to it.
Mhm. And I'll build on to that too. And I mean, Angie and Carl said perfectly. I would just say, just be genuine with them. My advice would find someone that's a part of that community that does a lot of work for that community, a leader in that community, and talk to them, share your ideas and your passion with them, and be like, hey, listen, this is what we're doing and what we're wanting to do. We would love if you would be involved with us, and get them involved, because once you talk to that person, then that's when you start getting other people from that community getting involved as well, because they're like, oh, he or she is doing that. Let's get involved with them, with what they're doing with Mindy and Dan. And so once you identify who that person is and talk to them and share with them what you're wanting to do and your ideas, then the rest will follow. Because I don't know, it probably wouldn't be the best idea to just show up to a Mexican restaurant and be like, hey, we would love if you guys come out. And don't get me wrong, you can do that, but I think you would have a better feedback if you found a leader in that community, because that leader then would share with the other people in that community, like, hey guys, this Mindy and Dan in this group is doing great work. We need to support them because they want to support us. And then that's when the flux of people start pouring in, is when you just show that you're genuine. Because a lot, especially here recently, in past year and a half, 2 years, diversity and inclusion has, became this big topic, and all the organizations and workplaces are, doing their part to make sure that they're practicing it. But a lot of the people that are in these minority groups just feel like, it's just for PR, just for good publicity. They don't mean it. They're not really here for us. And so if you eliminate that stigma and show that you are genuine in the work that you're trying to do, then that will make it a lot easier. And that's when you'll start getting people getting involved. Does anybody else have anything to add on top of that? We could go to Daniel.
I was gonna say, I acknowledge that I'm not a member of the panel, but I do have some experience with this particular situation, Mindy. I used to work as an ESL instructor with the Hispanic Outreach Program at Berea, and something that we often encountered was the very same issue, like how to actually communicate and recruit with clients who we wanted to provide our services to in an accessible and respectable way that didn't come across as invasive. So something that I would really recommend is that if you have any written materials like flyers or anything advertising your events, do your best to have that accessible language-wise. So all of us are at the program, we're bilingual, right? And we often, we're able to communicate, but you would be dealing with people who have different language ability or different literacy rates in either their native or a secondary language. So just if you have materials like that, I would do your best to have like an English and a Spanish translation, also accessible on the same page. Another thing we would do is that there is a Catholic church in the community that a lot of the members of the Hispanic population would attend regularly. So reaching out to those faith leaders who would be able to share information with their congregation in a way that doesn't really single individuals out, but make it a way to have that information distributed, say like after Mass or something when everyone's gathered, and be able to get in contact with leaders of the community in that regard. And also, if you do go to places like restaurants, just making a quick appointment with like the manager to distribute that information to them to provide to their employees. So it's coming from a person who is familiar with them and they don't really have to interact with someone they don't know that well about this information, but having it kind of softened through like a middleman who they are familiar with, if that makes sense. But I hope that's helpful.
I thought that those were some great examples that really related to Chase's comment about like finding a leader within the community that you're trying to reach. And I know that Mindy and Dan, you all do like great frequent like monthly events for, like you mentioned the Pride event that you did, and then I think you also do like a women's in the arts. So I think, if you all wanted to do some kind of like event that was like maybe like a one-time event to like build off of like a relationship once you do form that relationship, I think that that could be really cool. So I just wanted to affirm that. I think that that's awesome that you all are trying to do different events that are reaching different people in your community.
Those are all great ideas. Thank you, everyone, because I think typically our approach would be to go have lunch at the Mexican restaurant and just wear the people out. Like, here's what we do, here's where we are, you come and visit us. And, we do all this stuff and we would love to include you, but that's too general. You're right. And we do have a connection with the Mexican people that we can probably utilize. And instead of asking them for donations and free food for events, we need to go to that contact and say, can you help us interact with these people? Because we want to do some things to serve them, whether it's art and music alone, whatever that would make them, be more a part of the community. Same with the Christian college here. They have a large population of students of color, but of course they're only here during the student year. And I guess some of them go home on the weekends, but we'd also like to include them. So, getting into the college and asking questions. I don't know. We don't want to say, hey, you are Black, and what kind of music do you like? I don't know if that's appropriate or not to do, but all the ideas you've given us are great. Can I ask that question? Can I say to those kids at college?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I would just the same thing. I would show up. With COVID, I don't know, obviously each college campus has different guidelines. But I would just, like Daniel mentioned, create a form of literature, whether it's a flyer about an upcoming event or an infographic telling a little bit about your organization, and just handing it to advisors or people that hang it up around the college campus. So when students are walking by, they can see, oh, Mindy and Dan's have an event for Hispanic Heritage Month or Asian Pacific Islander Month or something like that. There's going to be food, music. Let's go check it out, see what's going on. Or say that, you're looking for artists or just any kind of literature, really, because that's really how you get the message across. to college students is just putting the information out there that's easy and accessible for them to see, and not too much information, because I can tell you just from personal experience, we write a lot of papers and read a lot of books, and so we don't want to look at something and that looks like we're gonna have to read a lot. So just basic stuff that's hitting the points, I think would really help get the message across on college campuses.
I would just add to Mindy that I think that colleges, for students that stay on their campus, colleges and universities really want them to have that student experience. And so they're willing to work with community to provide those types of events for their students. You should have a student affairs officer or somebody that's in charge and probably already knows a lot of the questions that you're already asking, probably knows the answers to those things. Resident advisors that are in charge of their specific dorms. If you could get in with those guys, you could probably find a lot of the answers that you seek about what would interest students.
Great. Thank you for all that information. That makes it seem so much easier than what I'm picturing it to be. So thank you.
I think it's been a long time since I've been a young person, but what I remember in those years.
Me too, Carl.
But one thing I did not like, and I advised myself, and kind of goes back to, I was saying about, just connecting instead of trying to, I felt like a salesman, or it felt yucky. Don't ask a question you're not ready to deliver on. If you're wanting it to be a student led, or you're saying, hey, what do you all want? What can we do to help you bring in, the worst thing you do to young people is pick their brain, give them a moment and say, yeah, we're not going to do that. Thanks anyway. You've checked the box, good. But we're going to do but we know better. So we're going to do it this way. I mean, and I don't think anybody likes it, but young people, or when I was in my activist years as a young person, you wanted me to disconnect with you and write you off, pick my brain and just to make it look like you're listening, just to fortify a preconceived decision you've already made before you even laid eyes on me or my group or my group of friends or whatever. That's just that just never comes off good. And I'm not saying anybody here does that, but I just remember, trying to remember, if I'm going up to somebody, how can I come across as, just, we're all genuine. We all at least have the potential to be genuine. Don't be something more than you are. Just come out. Because I think on the opposite side, I really appreciated when an adult or somebody of influence or power, whatever that may be, took the time and engaged. That left a huge impression on me. So.
And that ties back into the inclusiveness that we learned about in our presentation. If you go out and ask the younger generation their opinion on things that are going on, or things they would like to see in their community, take it into consideration. Ask them, see what they want. Because I just, for an example, here in our community, I'm still like to think I'm a part of sort of the younger generation here in our community. There's nothing for people my age or younger to do here in Laurel County. But if you ask someone that's a part of the older generation, they swear up and down that there's all kinds of stuff to do here. And it's a constant bickering back and forth between the two on, whether there's stuff to do here or not. And finally, we're starting to get younger people into leadership roles here that are actively saying, we do like stuff for our younger generation, our kids here. So they're finally starting to take steps to try to bring stuff here. And that's a part of being inclusive, not feeling like, oh, we're older, so we know more than you. They're starting to let them sit at the table now, and we're starting to work together instead of against each other. And then I would also like to mention too, Mindy, if you all ever have any kind of volunteer opportunities, that's another great way to get college students or even high school students involved as well. Because once they, especially high school students, because they need the volunteer hours. And once they hear about an organization that has these volunteer opportunities, you're going to get them, you're going to get their friends, you're going to get their friends' friends. And then that's when you start getting younger generation, and also who's going to drop them off? Their parents. So not only are you getting them, but you're also getting their parents as well, which can help add to the crowd at your events. So are there any other questions?
I just wanted to be sure. Dee, did you have your hand up a minute ago? And you had, I think, one of the hands raised. I wanted to make sure we caught if you had something
Yeah,
to say.
I've already put it in the chat.
Oh, you got it in the chat? Oh, okay.
Let's see. Yeah, sitting and talking to people. Yeah, I mean, it sounds simple, but really that's all it takes is just sitting and treating people like human beings, just talking with them, having these conversations. Networking is huge. If you want to, have big events or let people know of your organization, developing those relationships and networking is a huge part of that. I can't stress that enough. I didn't realize how big networking, how important it is until I started doing this work. And I mean, being in the nonprofit world, we're all in this to make the world a better place for whether it be our planet or the people on our planet. We're all in this together. So you just talking to anybody, networking in the nonprofit world, you're developing those relationships, whether it be with, and even if that person can't help you, they're going to definitely know someone who can help you. And so that's where that networking comes into play. So if there's not any other questions, Donna and Jacqueline, we can move on to the questions that we had answered prior to this presentation.
Yeah, that sounds great, Chase. I know that we got one other question in advance, and I shared that out with panel members, but it was really in relation to if you are someone who is witnessing like a microaggression against someone else occur, what is the best way to handle this? I think that the person that submitted that, they had referenced that they don't want to make the person who experienced microaggression feel like everybody in the room is paying, like the spotlight is on them necessarily, but they also don't, and that they are somebody who needs time to process, but they also don't want to be complicit in something that's happening that's like an act of violence against somebody else, even if it's in a microaggression form. So that was another question that had come up that if you all maybe want to speak to, that'd be great. And then we can move into those panel questions.
Does anybody want to start off? Keith, Carl, Angie.
I was typing a resource in the chat, and I'll leave it there. It's called Micro Intervention Strategies and What You Can Do to Disarm and Dismantle Individual and Systemic Racism and Bias. It really follows a bystander prevention kind of program. If you're familiar with those, Green Dot Community has a violence prevention program to help create cultural change for sexual and domestic violence, but it kind of follows those guidelines. So it has some really good reference points in there on things that you can do and strategy that you can embrace instead of if you're in a position where you're fearful of causing violence to yourself or make it worse on another individual that is experiencing these microaggressions. But it gives you some really good reference points. Some of the ones that it says is to recognize and decode hidden expressions of bias. And I think I'm answering the number 4 question already, so I don't know. That's what I'm trying to save some of that answer for that. But the Harvard implicit bias, explicit bias test. And I think that Jacqueline already has that resource, but that's a great resource to have, and to just figure out your own biases and work from there. And then becoming aware of how harmful it is that these biases, how harmful of an effect it is for the person that's experiencing them. And then to create norms around situations that counter those biases. So that's a great book. And I'll put it in the chat for y'all.
Thank you for that, Angie. I'll go next. And with the microaggressions, if you're in a situation like that, I think the best thing that you can do is not make it worse by trying to, agitate the aggressor. So if you see something like that going on, step in if you can. If you feel comfortable enough, step in and be like, hey, maybe that's not the correct term to use, or you're not treating them how you would want to be treated. But if you don't feel comfortable in stepping in between a situation like that, my next form of advice would be just after that situation has kind of de-escalated or it's ended and the two parties walk away or whatever, find that person that was dealing with that and give them comfort, let them know that they're not alone, that you support them, that you're there for them, and just let them know, just give them I want to say a shoulder to cry on, that they may not want to cry, but just being there for that person and letting them know that they're not alone. Because the worst feeling that someone can go through is going through a situation like that where someone wasn't being very respectful of their whatever it is, and then walking away from that situation alone and feeling like all eyes were on you, everyone was making fun of you, you're all in this by yourself. So just being there for that person, I think, is the best thing that you can do if you don't feel comfortable in stepping in between in that situation and letting that the aggressor know, like, hey, you need to back off because you're not being too friendly right now. So those would be my two forms of advice.
Does anybody else have any other thoughts to add to that question?
Carl and Keith, please feel free anytime to just hop on. You can always, and Angie too, you can always, if I get to talk, and just talk over me. and I mean, Daniel, anybody, I in talking with Donna and Jacqueline, I didn't want the panelists to be, set up on a stage where only us can talk. If anybody has anything that they would like to add, please feel free to. Daniel already has, and like you saw, provided great information and resources. And so this is more of a conversation on us just talking and helping each other, rather than just listening to four people talk the whole time. This is a conversation between all of us.
So Chase, I'm thinking maybe I'm not brave enough if I see a microaggression going on, and maybe I can't really identify it when it's happening. For instance, last year at one of our shows that was controversial, there was a church lady out front in her van handing out Bibles and talking to people, whether they were comfortable with it or not. So do I try to intervene in that? Do I try to just witness what's going on? Or what would you suggest in a situation like that?
Well, see, that's kind of a tough situation, because if she was at your event, you do have the right.
She was, and she was protesting our event by handing out religious information with certain passages highlighted in the Bible.
Mhm.
And she claimed to the police that there was an unsupervised underage child there who was exposed to something that might, ruin his whole life. That's a whole nother story. It
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
work out in her favor, but that was really heinous.
Mhm. Yeah, I would, in a situation like that, if that person is there trying to cause trouble, I mean, it's different if you're out in a public space, like if your event was at a park, you obviously can't kick that person out because it's public property. They have a right to be there. But if you're in like a closed space, like a building, and you're using like a convention center or something for your event, I would just walk up to that person and just see, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do? If that person is still aggressive and like being hateful towards you and what you're doing, then that's when you can, bring someone to the side and be like, hey, this person here is causing trouble for the people here at our event, not putting a good look on what we have going on here. Do you think we can sort of escort them out and just be real nice about it? Don't, like in the movies, like someone's in a club when they're not supposed to, and pick them up, toss them out. Don't do anything like that. They'll make the situation worse. But always just try to, anytime something like that happens, just try your best to de-escalate it. And if that doesn't work, then just kindly be like, if you're not going to work with us, we're going to have to ask you to kindly leave. And it sounded like in a situation like that, she probably wouldn't be open to leaving, that she was there to make your life difficult, unfortunately. But in the work or in the world of diversity and inclusion, you see stuff like that all the time. Like Carl mentioned with Lake Cumberland, their event they had last year, that's something they dealt with. And it put a bad look on their organization, and so they had to reach out to others to try to rebuild that reputation back up and get people back out to their events. So you want to take the right steps to where you're not tarnishing your reputation or making you look bad, because that's just what that person is trying to do. They're trying to make you look bad and trying to get people to follow behind them instead of seeing and recognizing the great work that you're doing.
Berea College has actually dealt with this kind of situation too, Mindy. And of course, now Berea is a large institution, but there are, and I can't remember the name of the specific religious groups, but there are these religious groups that have gone around the country and protested very openly, and Pinpoint Evangelist is that one, Daniel. So what the college said is that you may protest out there on the public sidewalk, but you don't protest on our property, because we are a private college. And then there were instructions and education that went out to the students to say, don't engage with these protesters, don't interact with them, especially don't get violent with them, because they're seeking that in some ways, because it gives them publicity. And so the idea that the college had was that we cannot stop them. They have the right to protest, but they have to do it on public property. And I can't remember if the city maybe even had them, they had to get a permit maybe to even do that protesting. Of course, now that, because the city and the college have an agreement, and the college is a pretty big institution, but I don't know, if you could approach a situation like that, if they're on your property at the gallery trying to protest, you could say to them, public road is right there. You can protest on the public road, but you can't do it on our private property. And
yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's just, it's still a hard situation, because you're still dealing with relationships in community, and how do you manage relationship coming out of that? So that's the sticky piece. But
yeah, I just wanted to affirm what Donna said, is that usually most cities have ordinances against protesting, or rules that certain parameters in which they can protest. And so that should be available to anybody that looks those up. and just to know what the rules are beforehand of what they can and cannot do. And then there was a Black Lives Matter protest in Corbin, and somebody got a hold of the microphone that should not have had the microphone and was causing a disruption. And so what happened at that point was that everybody in the crowd just turned their back to them while they were talking, and eventually they stopped. So even something like that might be something that can happen to disrupt what you're going through.
It's almost like that's a nonviolent counter protest that is pretty effective. You feel pretty unheard when people turn their backs to you.
That's true too. You're right. You're right. So I think we need to be prepared for future events when protests might happen, because we are not going to stop what we're doing, because what we're doing is right in our mission and our vision. So I think then maybe with our board members or whatever, there might need to be some training on that. And we could form a line of protection for our people who attend, because we've had shows, the art of the tattoo, and all these people show up with tattoos all over their bodies and they're part of the artwork, but the general population may not be so accepting of that. And I don't know. So
I really like the idea of engaging your board members in and think about how to deal with this, just because I think that, because I can imagine for you all, you felt like you were just like hanging out there exposed. And
we did not expect it.
Yeah.
A lady who prayed all around the building the day of this particular art show. And then the lady showed up with her Bibles, and she invaded our space and upset our clientele.
Yeah, and for them, it's a values-based protest that they feel very strongly about. So you're not going to sway their opinions, but you could probably use some of those techniques to at least say, you can have your opinion, I value your opinion, but you can't have it on my property.
That's very important. So I think all the references in this training that you're sending us, I think is very important for our board and the boards of so many other organizations that we're involved with, like the Chamber of Commerce. Oh my goodness. The Chamber of Commerce here is like all white, basically male people. And there's no diversity in the chamber. So anyway, that's a whole nother subject, but I think all these trainings need to happen with all of our groups in our communities. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Mindy, for asking that question. And Angelica just put in the chat what micro affirmations are, and they are small acts that say to the person experience the microaggression that you see them, that they aren't crazy, and that you did in fact experience something unpleasant and discriminatory, perhaps, even if it wasn't realized by the majority. So it's something simple, making eye contact or nod. And Angelica, you pointed out that like in that kind of large group setting that, at the Black Lives Matter protest, people turn their back to the person who was, and that's kind of an aggression, not really a microaggression, but I felt like that was an affirmation when people turn their backs to the people who were doing the aggression, and they were saying, I stand with the people who were here to support. So I just wanted to call that kind of connection up. So thank you for sharing that definition. And then I'm going to pop in the chat our kind of panel questions. I feel like our panelists and the discussions have been so focused around these questions. We've heard a lot of great ways to communicate, whether explicitly or implicitly, that you or your organization or your community are inclusive and welcoming to diverse backgrounds and people who are diverse or different than you. So did anybody else want to touch on that or say anything that maybe they haven't had a chance to say related to that question?
Does anybody want to take it first?
I could talk a little bit about, because when Brushy Fork does the community leadership program, which, this workshop is intended for us to share back with folks who are trying to do leadership development at the grassroots level. We talk a lot about leadership values, because I think people talk oftentimes in leadership development programs, they talk about skills and things like that, how to run meetings, how to plan projects, how to do things like that, how to budget. But, how to talk about the values with which you want to live your leadership life in the community. And so that is one of our leadership values is about inclusiveness, that leadership should be inclusive. And so to articulate that and then to come to understanding of that, what that means with the group, is one of the things. And then Berea College itself, as part of the college, we embrace workplace expectations and the college's great commitments. And as employees of the college has actually evaluates us on those workplace expectations, which have sometimes seemingly, you would look at that and go, well, that's not about job performance, but it really is, because of the way we want to create the kind of culture that we want to have at the college. So that articulation, I guess, is what we talk about.
Yeah, thank you for that, Donna. Anybody else would like to share? I had so forgive me, I'm reading off a little slide here because I typed my answer. But basically what I said was our organization's main mission is to educate, promote, and spread awareness on diversity and inclusion. And we are very passionate about this. And so we always are being sure to stress the fact that we are here for all people and not just a few. We strive to educate ourselves so that we may educate others on how to communicate correctly with each other, respect each other's values, and create that beloved community. That when starting up our organization, it was around the same time as the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor killings. So a lot of people were tying in what our organization does and with Black Lives Matter. And we got all kinds of, pushback and hate because of it, because people just, they didn't understand what we were here for. They thought we were only serving just one group of people, when in reality, we're serving the whole community. We're a community organization, not just an organization for just one specific minority group. So that's the way we sort of communicate with our community, is just continuing to stress the fact that we're here for everyone, not just the LGBTQ community, the Latino Hispanic community, the Black community. We're here for everyone, regardless of who you are, where you come from, how much money you have. If there's something that we can do to help you, we're gonna do it.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing, Chase. And I know, Angie, you had some thoughts related to what people can do to take steps towards examining their own biases. And I think it's really related to that other question of steps that everyone can take to improve the inclusion of the spaces around them. So if the panelists want to focus on that question next, that would be great. Whoever wants to start.
I don't care to go again. I typed out my answer, so forgive me as I just read off my screen. But the answer to that, it was, how have you centered inclusion and equity in your own workplace, group, or community? Simply just creating Unity Allies in the Diversity Council. When forming the board, I wanted it to represent the different forms of diversity that we have in our community, and not just a couple of people that look the same trying to represent other communities that they aren't a part of. So by sharing my vision and making sure I was inclusive to all people, we were able to form the Diversity Council, which is a form of Unity Allies. And Mindy, that kind of sort of goes back to how you mentioned in interacting and communicating with people from different communities. I had the same thought process when forming my board, that I didn't want to go into a situation where I wanted to host an event for, the LGBTQ community, and me not being a part of that community. I didn't want them feeling like, oh, what do you know about our community? And, why are you doing this if you aren't a part of our community? And so that's why it was important for me when forming my board to identify leaders in our community that were a part of these different communities, and sharing my vision with them and asking if they would serve with me in this effort to help bring our community together and more inclusive. And luckily, we have, I believe, 5 members on our board representing all all of us representing a different form of diversity. And obviously, only being 5 board members, we still have a lot of positions to fill. But we're making the steps towards identifying those other different leaders of different communities here in Laurel County, and asking if they would serve with us. So when we want to, host an event or do some kind of educational program or something, we have someone that's a part of that community that is educated on that specific minority group and can help us, reach that community or educate on that community.
So Chase, that's really important. We don't want to feel like we are inviting certain board members to be on the board because they're of a certain, you fill this spot that we need to fill, which I think in a lot of boards in the past has been the case. So you are the minority something, you're the minority something else. But I really appreciate you mentioning that we need to try to be inclusive of those people, because actually our first Pride event was a young teacher, and she said, I have a connection with Ashland Pride and let's do this thing. And I think getting to know folks and asking questions of them and knowing their backgrounds and their history and their interests can really make a board as diverse as it needs to be, as diverse as it can be in a small community, and try to reach all people. So this has been very informative for me and very instructional. And I think we're going to do some training with the boards that I'm associated with these issues.
Good. And I'll say too, because you do bring up a good point. You don't, like I was mentioning earlier, how some of the organizations are, saying they're doing their part, but a lot of people don't believe in it. You don't have to just walk up to someone you never met before and be like, hey, you're a part of this community, come serve on our board. Just, continue showing your work and what you do on social media, and people will see and people will want to be involved. And anytime you have an event, you never know, somebody from the Hispanic community may walk up and be like, I've seen what you've been doing. I think it's great. I would love if I can, get involved with what you're doing. And then once you start forming that relationship with that person and they start understanding what your organization does, then you can be like, hey, what are your thoughts on serving on our board? You've been active in the things that we've been doing and you've been nothing but supportive. We think you would be a perfect fit. And then that's when those spots start getting filled, as opposed to just going to someone you've never met before and asking them to serve on your board. You want to have people on your board that are going to help your organization with your mission, and not just serving as a title, like, oh, I'm a part of so and so. Well, what do you do? They can't even tell you the mission. So you want to have those people that are genuine and passionate about the work that you're doing to serve on your board. That's why I've been so blessed with Carl and Angelica and Keith. Luckily I've already known them for a while, and so when I brought up the idea to them, they're like, yeah, perfect, sign me up. And so I was blessed enough to have great people like them. But yeah, when you're first starting an organization like this up, they can tell you we're in the same boat as you. We come from a community that lacks diversity. I think on our website, I need to go back and update it, but I believe our population is like 94% white or something like that. And so when we first came out with this organization, I can't tell you how much pushback we got. But I'll tell you the same thing I tell everybody in our organization. You can only help who wants to be helped. If someone doesn't agree with what you're doing, don't lose sleep over it. Help those that want to be helped, and those who don't, there's nothing you can do for them. If they want to have that closed mind, so be it. You're going to continue doing the great work that you're doing and helping those that want to be helped and served. So
I would like to point out too, and I'd like to encourage everyone to draw inspiration from those before us. I think of the civil rights movement, and in order to encourage inclusivity and diversity in a restaurant, people had to sit under duress of violence and legal action and everything to sit at a counter, to look aggressor in the face, and to have the bravery to say, hey, we want to be included, we want to be part of make this place diverse. And so in our workplaces, that same kind of bravery, so whether the fear is even when it's genuine, like I may offend someone or I may be approaching them the wrong way, sometimes we have to take especially when in an area like ours, that doesn't necessarily have to be diverse, because there's such a low number of people of the others necessarily, and we're trying to really draw it out. It's okay. Don't be afraid to go into the unknown, despite you might, hey, oh, you know what, you said something to a person of Hispanic culture and you may have accidentally tried to relate and you did it the wrong way. It's understandable. It happens. Be brave. And and if you see that you offended them, then we'll use our kindness and our respect to apologize and try to engage a different way. But let's not allow that fear to stop us from making the effort.
great point, Keith. And like he said too, I keep telling everyone that the world of diversity is huge. It's ever growing. There's always new terms, new norms coming out, and so you can't know everything. Even in being in the work that we're in, there are still some terms out there that we may not be familiar with, or we may catch ourselves falling back on our previous biases. It's just having that self-respect and respect of others and humility to acknowledge your faults and apologize for it, instead of being like, oh, I'm not going to apologize for that. Like he said, if you say the wrong thing or you try to interact with someone and you do it the wrong way, admit to it. Be like, I know what I did was wrong. I see that now, and I'm making the steps to improve on that, to where that won't happen again. And then educating others too as well. And when I say sitting down and having these conversations, when you're having these conversations with people, that you're taking their time too. They're not just taking your time. So you want to be sure that you're sitting there with open ears, and that it's not just going through one ear and out the other, that you're actually listening to this person and understanding their form of diversity, whether it's their religious belief or where they come from, the language they speak, whatever. You want to make sure that this person that you're talking to feels like you are listening to them and seeing them for who they are, instead of just, feeling like you're just sitting there doing your part, if that makes sense.
So, Chase, the thing is, I'm having this conversation with someone who is so adverse to our mission, goals, beliefs. I can say, I acknowledge this is how you believe and I don't. And do you think that's how you leave it?
Yes, ma'am. And others are welcome to jump in, but I believe so. that time back to the community that we come from. I'll share a story that I heard my mother share. I don't know if she'll want me to share this or not, but I'll go ahead and do it anyways. So my mother is a cosmetologist. She cuts hair and does lashes and all that good stuff for a living. So she deals with all kinds of people in our community, people that she's done their hair for years. And so when I first created this organization, she, people are starting to find out about the work that we do, that we're here representing, the LGBTQ community, the Hispanic community, everybody, representing everybody. And so, obviously in the work that we're doing in the community that we live in, we face a lot of pushback from people that don't have those same beliefs, especially when it comes to your sexual preference. And she was cutting this person's hair one day, and, we were facing some struggles. We weren't getting the support that we were hoping we were going to get. And she had asked this person to pray for us, because I believe that they were a minister at a church or something. And he told her no. He straight up said, "I'm not going to do that. I don't agree with the work that they do, and I can't pray for you." And it really, hurt her feelings, and it hurts my feelings too, and it makes me angry. But like I keep saying, you can't get to everybody. Not everyone wants to be helped and learn. You just can't let it discourage you and bring you down. You just have to accept that there's people out there like that, and just continue to move on. Say, I understand where you come from. We may not agree, but I'm not. That's all you can do at the end of the day.
Andy, I will add to what Chase is saying, because I agree with everything that Chase just said. But also I have learned with my work in uncomfortable conversations with Bridge the Gap, that there is a process in having these conversations that make it easier. And there is a pre-planning to the process of having the conversation. And I think you can find it online, but it's called the Fabulous Pop Method. And it is a way to have the conversation. Like, what is your purpose of having this conversation? Is it to change somebody's mind, or is it just to get to common ground that we're going to coexist in the same environment? And then to follow that outline. And then also, if you want to have a conversation with somebody, there's a whole psychology to it about, where you have the meeting, and if people feel safe enough to share, even when somebody doesn't agree with what you're talking about. If you can get to a point where there's a common courtesy, and how that's created beforehand makes a difference in the outcome. It could make a difference, and it could not make a difference in the outcome, but at least it has a better percentage not to go violently wrong and terribly awry. So you can find those. I can drop those in the link too, or send them via email.
That would be great, Angelica, if you would send those, drop them in the chat or send them in the email, because I would like to try to educate some of the boards and committees I'm on, because how it is in a small town, few people are on a lot of committees, and I think that would be really important for them to learn. So thank you.
Yes, and I think Jacqueline's already found
Right.
the Fabulous Pop model for you, but I'm also happy to share or help facilitate that in any way that you all would need. Jacqueline and Donna have my contact information, so I'm sure we're happy to pass it along.
Thank you, because that is our vision, our goal, that all people are included in whatever we do. So that's wonderful.
And Mandy, I just want to praise you for the work that you're doing in your community, and taking the steps and the effort and educating the others in your community as well, especially on the different boards and committees that you serve. You may be considered minority, with, having an open mind and doing this work that you're in and wanting to educate others on diversity and inclusiveness. It takes a lot of bravery. And I think you said you weren't brave in the chat earlier, but I beg to differ. The
Oh.
work that you're doing and taking the effort to educate
Thank you very
others.
much, Chase, because I have pushed some issues through that were very controversial in our community because I was passionate about them, whether it was the library or the restaurant tax for the Tourism Commission. So I'm only brave when things really.
I think we lost you, Mindy. Well, I think you are very brave, Wendy. And like I said, I really have a lot of respect for what you're doing in your community because, we know the struggle coming from a community that's the same. We know it can be hard and discouraging. And so I just want to, again, say I have a lot of respect for you to not being discouraged in what you're doing and, giving it up. It speaks a lot to your character.
Well, I just want to thank you so much, Chase and Angelica and Carl and Keith, who just had to leave, and everybody who's been on the call because this has been a small and mighty group because the participation has been really great. And we will follow up by sharing out this recording with everybody and sharing out a list of resources that have been mentioned in this call and just some additional ones that different partners have kind of gathered. So if you do have any other resources that you want to share, we would love to share those out. So we really just appreciate everybody's time and effort for being here. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all. You all were great answering my questions, my icebreaker. And Jacqueline, I don't know if you want the answer to the connecting the dots yet or not.
I'll take it.
So I'll just go ahead and
Secretly.
Mindy, do you still want to figure it out?
Yeah,
we can share it out too.
Okay. Share it to me.
Yeah, let me pull that back up here for us real quick if I can find it. Labels, impressions. There we go. Connecting the dots. Let me do a new share the whole screen. All right, can you all see it?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so basically a common mistake that people do when they're doing this activity is they'll go on, try to connect the inside dots first. But the trick is connecting all of the dots on the outside, then working your way in, sort of thinking outside the box. That's sort of what this activity really wants you to do, is being able to think outside the box instead of confined, having that closed mind inside the box. So next time that you all try this activity, you can be the smartest person in the room by getting it done first, connecting all the dots.
Thanks so much for sharing, Chase.
Absolutely. Thank you all again.
Well, I hope everybody has a great evening. Thanks so much for being here and take care.
See you all.
See you, everybody. Take care.